Top 10 Secret Organizations That Rule the World. Imagine a world where the most important decisions are made not in public debates, but in closed rooms, without witnesses, without cameras, without the right to choose. They say we live in a free society, but is it really so? What if there is an invisible hand behind every global conflict, financial collapse, or technological breakthrough? Who are those who pull the strings? In this video, we will lift the curtain on the 10 most influential secret organizations that, according to researchers and conspiracy theorists, have been ruling the world for centuries. Freemasons, Illuminati, Committee of 300, Opus Dei, Black Aristocracy. These names are whispered, but they influence billions. We will show you not just lists, but shocking facts, mysterious symbols, stories of silence, and real traces of influence. And most importantly, we'll tell you why they stay in the shadows, and what could happen if the truth comes out. Stay until the end. Some facts will change your perception of reality. Subscribe right now, because this is just the beginning. There will be even more noise. 9 Immortals. In ancient India, in the 3rd century BC, after one of the bloodiest battles in human history, the Battle of Kalinga, King Ashoka the Great, the conqueror and emperor of the Maurya dynasty, experienced a deep spiritual shock. Fields covered with the dead, the cries of the dying, rivers of blood. This was not only a collapse for his enemies, but also a turning point for himself. It was then, according to legend, that he decided to turn away from conquests and devote his life to saving humanity from itself. Thus began the story of the mysterious 9 Immortals, an organization that even modern intelligence services speak of in whispers. King Ashoka understood, knowledge is the most powerful weapon. Discoveries in the fields of science, energy, biology, even psychology can bring either great benefits or the destruction of all humanity. And so, instead of allowing this knowledge to become the property of random or cruel people, he ordered the creation of a special council, 9 of the wisest, most educated, most loyal people. Each of them was to guard one of the 9 books of knowledge. These books were not just collections of facts. They contained the deepest, most dangerous, and most advanced knowledge that humanity was not yet ready to use wisely. Book 1 is about energy management. According to legend, it describes how to obtain infinite energy from various sources, including nuclear reactions, anti-gravity, and even psychic energy. This knowledge could change everything in the world, but at the same time cause unimaginable destruction. Book 2 is about psychology. It supposedly contains techniques for manipulating mass consciousness, methods for controlling emotions, fear, and will. What politicians, sect leaders, and some special services use today is only a faint shadow of the knowledge of this book. According to unofficial versions, it was the leakage of fragments of this book that allowed the creation of ideologies that governed millions of people. Book 3 is biology and viruses. This concerns the artificial creation of diseases, their modification and means of control. It is believed that some of the knowledge got to the alchemists of the Middle Ages, and later to the secret laboratories of the 20th century. Book 4 is devoted to communication, not only between people, but also between consciousnesses. It describes how to transmit thoughts, feelings, and even knowledge without words and technology. Telepathy, biofields, brainwave resonance. All these are just elements of the depth that this book studied. Book 5 is prophecy. According to legend, its authors studied the connections between events, cycles of nature, and human behavior. Statistics, mathematics, astronomy, and something more. Together they allowed to predict wars, the fall of empires, and catastrophes. This knowledge resembles current attempts to model the future through artificial intelligence, but with incredible accuracy. The 6th book is about gravity and anti-gravity. It describes the designs of aircraft that can move in space without engines, due to energy fields. The texts of the ancient Vedas mention vimanas, flying ships, which are perhaps the result of the knowledge of this book. The 7th book talks about alchemy and the transmutation of substances, not only about the transformation of metals into gold, but also about the creation of substances that can cure any disease or give extraordinary abilities. Modern chemistry is only the initial level of this knowledge. The 8th book is about weapons, but not ordinary ones. We are talking about vibrational, psychotronic sound weapons that can affect not the body, but the mind, memories, even the soul. Such developments began in secret laboratories during the Cold War but have not yet reached what is described in the legends about the Nine. And finally, the ninth book is about sociology, the organization of societies and political mechanisms. According to myths, it describes in detail how to create an ideal or completely controlled society. The knowledge from it could turn any state into a utopia or a dystopia. Each of the 9 sages passed his book to a chosen person, an heir, capable not only of preserving knowledge, but also of preventing its misuse. They acted in the shadows, changing the course of history without armies, without empires, without blood. Some believe that the 9 immortals still exist today, under other names, in the shadow of large governments, transnational corporations, secret councils. In the 21st century, conspiracy theorists are once again returning to the legend of the 9. Who are they? Sages or guardians? Defenders of humanity or its secret masters? And most importantly, what will happen if even one of these books becomes publicly available? Perhaps the world will change forever, or perhaps it will disappear. The Priory of Sion is one of the most mysterious and at the same time the most discussed organizations in world history. Its name is shrouded in shadows, legends, disputes, and hidden meanings. According to the most common version, the Priory of Sion was founded in 1099 in Jerusalem during the First Crusade, when the Crusaders captured the Holy City. It was then, according to legend, that a secret community arose that had not just a religious or political goal, but a much deeper task: to protect one of the greatest secrets of humanity, the existence of the bloodline of Jesus Christ. The central idea of the Priory of Sion is not simply to preserve historical memory or sacred relics. The point is that Jesus Christ did not die on the cross in the form in which he is presented to us in the canonical Gospels, but had a wife, Mary Magdalene, and offspring. This offspring, according to legend, was saved and taken to southern France, where it later gave rise to the noble Merovingian family, a dynasty that ruled the Frankish kingdom in the early Middle Ages. Therefore, the Priory of Sion had a single overarching task: to protect the blood of Jesus, both physical heredity and its spiritual significance. The organization, according to those who believe in its reality, guarded documents, genealogies, sacred knowledge, and, possibly, the Holy Grail itself. However, the Grail in this version is not a cup, but the womb of Mary Magdalene, a symbolic source of the divine race. Hence another aspect of the Priory's activities, sacred geography. Its essence lies in the identification and protection of sacred places, energy points on Earth, connected with a divine principle or hidden mystical portals. Often such places were disguised as Catholic churches, chapels, tombs, or even villages. One of the most famous such centers is the village of Rennes-le-Château in France, a place where, as is believed, great secrets of the Church, wealth, and possibly confirmation of the existence of the bloodline of the Messiah are hidden. The traces of the Priory of Sion are lost in the mists of history, but some sources claim that such outstanding personalities as Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Victor Hugo, Claude Debussy, Jean Cocteau belonged to it. All of them appear in the so-called list of Grand Masters, found in the 1970s in France. It was these dossiers of Sion that became the source of high-profile publications and gave rise to an avalanche of research, speculation, and theories. Some call these documents a forgery, others an indication of the highest conspiracy against the true history of mankind. In 2003, the Priory of Sion received a new surge of popularity thanks to the novel by Dan Brown, The Da Vinci Code. In the book, this organization appears as a powerful structure that controls religious knowledge, hides the truth about Christ, and fights against the Vatican and Opus Dei. And although the author later emphasized that this is a work of fiction, the wave of interest in the topic was already unstoppable. Pilgrimages to Rennes-le-Château, investigations, films, books, the Priory of Sion has become synonymous with a grand conspiracy in which even the Catholic Church may be involved. But who is really behind this organization? Does it exist today? According to some theories, the Priory of Sion is not a single structure, but rather a network of influence that operates through certain families, elite clubs, learned societies, and institutes. Their goal is to prevent the truth about the origin of Christianity from being permanently distorted or used against humanity. According to legend, the priory is said to be opposed to other powerful secret societies, in particular the Illuminati, who want to destroy religion as such or subordinate it to a new world order. Other researchers claim that the Priory of Sion was actually created in the 20th century as an elaborate hoax by the French adventurer Pierre Plantard. According to them, he fabricated dossiers, invented a list of masters, and created a myth out of thin air. But even in this case, the phenomenon of the Priory of Sion does not disappear. It becomes a symbol of humanity's desire for mystery, for the search for hidden knowledge that explains who we are and where we come from. Does the Priory of Sion exist today? And if so, does it still guard the blood, the grail, and the knowledge that can change our world? Or has its mission long been fulfilled, and now new organizations have taken on the responsibility of protecting the truth? There are no answers. There's only silence, darkness, and the feeling that somewhere, in the shadows of history, there are still those who know more than any government or church. And they will not let the truth destroy humanity, at least not until we are ready for it. The Jesuit Order, or Society of Jesus, Societas Jesu, was founded in 1540 by the Spanish soldier-turned-mystic Ignatius of Loyola, with the blessing of Pope Paul III. Its creation coincided with the era of the Catholic Reformation, when the Church was losing influence due to Protestant movements. But unlike many religious orders of the time, the Jesuits did not confine themselves to the walls of monasteries. They sought action, missions, diplomacy, and education. From the first days of their appearance, the Society of Jesus had a clear goal: to defend and spread the Catholic faith by all available means, including intellectual influence and political maneuvering. The Jesuits were not a secret society in the classical sense. They did not hide their existence or goals. However, their activities were always accompanied by a deep non-publicity, a strategic shadow, where diplomacy bordered on intrigue and faith on power. Their motto, Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam, to the greater glory of God, became the slogan not just of spiritual service, but of an ideology of influence, in which God and the Vatican were inextricably linked with global politics, education, and the secret struggle for ideological dominance. One of the main spheres of influence of the Jesuits was education. They founded thousands of schools, colleges, and universities around the world, especially in Europe, South America, and Asia. It was through this network that they trained future leaders, judges, diplomats, and even royal advisors. Their pedagogy was based not only on religious doctrines, but also on rigorous logic, rhetorical skill, and a deep knowledge of philosophy, languages, law, medicine, and politics. Thus, they did not just teach, they shaped a worldview and laid the foundation for loyalty to the Catholic Church. But outside the educational system, the Jesuits have always acted as a shadowy force in the political arena. In many European countries, they were suspected of interfering in the affairs of thrones, conspiring, and manipulating kings and ministers. Some believed that the Jesuits were behind a series of political assassinations, regime changes, and even major geopolitical upheavals. In the 16th and 17th centuries, their names were often mentioned in accusations of attempting to control monarchs, manipulate papal elections, and establish a worldwide Catholic monarchy. Their influence was so profound that in some countries, such as France, Portugal, England, and Japan, the order was banned and its members exiled, sometimes even executed. The Jesuits were feared because they knew too much and never said too much. They possessed the arts of persuasion, hypnotic argumentation, and impeccable command of several languages. Their agents worked in the courts, the army, colonial administrations, diplomatic missions. Sometimes they were indistinguishable from a simple scientist, sometimes from a general. A Jesuit could be the confessor of a king, a mentor to his children, and at the same time an observer of the Vatican. All this gave rise to theories that the order did not simply act for the good of the Church, but formed a parallel vertical of power, spiritual, intellectual, and political. A significant part of their activity was directed at missionary work in the colonies. In Latin America, the Jesuits created reductions, autonomous settlements for local peoples, where Christianity, education, self-government, and crafts were combined. At the same time, these were zones of influence, where the Jesuits actually formed their own mini-states, sometimes independent of the royal power of Spain or Portugal. In China, they were the first Western scholars to bring knowledge from Europe and adapt it to the local culture, creating a unique bridge between civilizations. However, in 1773, the order was officially abolished by Pope Clement XIV under pressure from secular rulers who feared the Jesuits' excessive influence. This decision did not stop them. Many brothers remained underground, adapting to new conditions, and some even moved to Protestant countries, where they continued to serve under different names. In 1814, the order was restored, and since then it has gained strength again, this time more diplomatically, not so openly, but still powerful. Today, the Society of Jesus has more than 15,000 members in more than 100 countries. They run universities, engage in humanitarian missions, research, and social policy consulting. One of the most famous Jesuits of our time, Pope Francis, is the first pope from this order in history. This has given rise to a new wave of debate. Does the Vatican really belong to the Jesuits today, and has their century-old expectation of power over the Catholic Church finally come true? Many believe that the Jesuits today do not just exist. They shape the ideological narratives of the world, influence international politics, environmental movements, intellectual discourses. They do not shout about themselves, do not broadcast, do not leave traces on social networks. But it is precisely this silent presence that is their greatest weapon. The Jesuit order is not about a conspiracy in the basement. It is about strategic thinking, intellectual control, and power that comes not with a sword, but with an idea that shapes the consciousness of generations. The Committee of 300 is one of the most mysterious and discussed superstructures in modern conspiracy theory. It is sometimes called the secret world government, the invisible fist, or the gray architects of the New World Order. It was first mentioned in public by British political analyst John Coleman, a former officer of the British intelligence agency MI6, who in 1991 published the work, The Committee of 300, The Secret Society of the World's Elite, which later became the foundation for an entire era of suspicion and investigation. According to Coleman, the Committee of 300 is a supranational grouping consisting of 300 influential people, representatives of old European dynasties, financial magnates, heads of transnational corporations, bankers, founders of think tanks, and spiritual leaders. Its roots, it is claimed, go back to the British East India Company, a monopoly trading empire that controlled a large part of the world on behalf of the crown since the 17th century. Over time, according to theorists, this structure transformed, became less public, but retained its power and influence through secret agreements between financial elites and political clans. The Committee of 300 has never officially appeared in any international document. No state, no union recognizes its existence. But it is this lack of traces that causes great concern among researchers. Where there is no official mention, the most real shadow power often hides. According to alternative analysts, the Committee of 300 controls such organizations as the UN, NATO, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, as well as such secret or semi-secret clubs as the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, and even the Illuminati. The essence of the committee's influence is control through infrastructure. They supposedly manage energy flows, decide the fate of currencies, and dictate the terms of global politics. The world's largest financial dynasties, the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Warburgs, DuPonts, and Oppenheimers, are considered mere external faces, the screens of that invisible force that shapes the world's agenda. All world wars, economic crises, and social upheavals, according to theories, were planned or at least allowed by this committee as an instrument for the redistribution of power, wealth, and resources. One of the committee's main ideas, as attributed to it by conspirators, is to reduce the world's population. It involves supporting global wars, epidemics, and man-made disasters, as well as promoting the concept of depopulation through control over healthcare, food, water, and reproductive technologies. The committee allegedly finances programs for birth control, genetic experiments, and the introduction of new means of social monitoring, from digital passports to biometric control. The influence of the Committee of 300 is also manifested in the cultural space. It is claimed that it controls the mass consciousness through media empires, Hollywood, the music industry, and social networks. Pop stars, blockbuster films, news narratives, all this is supposedly aimed at forming a consumer culture that dulls critical thinking. Coleman and his followers describe this as a silent psychological war, the main weapons of which are not bullets, but words, images, and repetition. Another area of activity of the committee is the so-called programming of the future through analytical centers such as the Rand Corporation, the Brookings Institution, the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. It is here, according to legends, that long-term strategies for managing humanity are developed. Economic models, war scenarios, plans for the development of artificial intelligence, climate simulations. Then these documents, framed as recommendations, fall into the hands of governments, corporations, and international institutions, and become new laws of reality. The Committee of 300 pays special attention to education. Through a system of grants, scholarships, training programs, and international ratings, they supposedly form entire generations of loyal experts who operate within a predetermined ideology. Harvard, Yale, the Sorbonne, and the London School of Economics are the world's elite universities that not only train professionals, but also program the thinking of future politicians, diplomats, and corporate executives. Despite all the hypothetical and fantastic nature of some of the statements, the very fact of mass belief in the Committee of 300 raises questions. Why are millions of people around the world willing to assume the existence of such a structure? Perhaps the answer lies not in the facts, but in the logic of the system itself. The modern world often seems too complex, opaque, and unfair. People are looking for explanations, and the Committee of 300 becomes a convenient model for understanding the invisible architecture of power. Does it really exist? There is no evidence. But there are strange coincidences. There are empires that have never proclaimed themselves publicly. There are voices that are heard only in closed rooms. There are laws that change the fate of millions, but no one knows the names of their authors. In this gloom, the Committee of 300 takes shape, not as a fact, but as a metaphor. The Order of the Golden Dawn is one of the most mysterious and influential occult organizations of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which gave impetus to a whole direction of Western esotericism. Created in 1888 in London, this order became a milestone in the history of secret knowledge, combining ritual magic, Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, and Hermeticism into a complex and closed system of initiations, rites, and mystical research. Its founders, William Robert Woodman, William Wynne Westcott, and Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, were Freemasons, occultists and translators of ancient esoteric texts. It was they who developed the unique structure of the order based on the legendary cipher manuscripts, which contain detailed information about rituals, degrees of initiation, and symbolic magic. These manuscripts mentioned alleged contacts with the so-called secret mentors, beings or teachers from higher levels of consciousness who guided the activities of the order. The structure of the Golden Dawn was based on a three-stage system. The first was focused on the theoretical study of magical and occult disciplines. The second, on the practical application of knowledge through rituals, astral travel, spiritualism, and magical actions. The third was the highest secret part, where only those who had achieved an internal transformation were allowed, which allowed them to perform the magic of influencing the collective unconscious. These stages had not only symbolic meaning, but also provided for a deep internal transformation through trials, rituals, mantras, work with tarot archetypes, planetary energy, and angels of the Kabbalistic tree of life. The Order of the Golden Dawn had a tremendous influence on the development of modern occultism. It was here that the foundations of modern ceremonial magic were formed, which later transformed into many directions, from the Thelema of Aleister Crowley to the Wiccan practices of the 20th century. Crowley himself, perhaps the most famous occultist of our time, was one of the students of the order. But his anarchic nature and desire to dominate led to conflicts, splits, and the final fall of the first version of the organization. Despite this, the principles that he took from the Golden Dawn formed the basis of his own system, Thelema, and the order itself became a symbol of initiation into secret paths. Of particular importance in the Golden Dawn was the study of magical work with symbols, the personal diary of the magician, the creation of a sacred circle, the summoning of egregores, communication with astral entities. Practitioners worked with archangels, archetypes of the elements, called on the energies of the planets, worked with colors, numbers, glyphs, and magical formulas. All of these elements became the basis for later systems of magic, which are taught today throughout the world in both open and occult circles. The Golden Dawn was also the first known organization to work seriously with the tarot as a tool of initiation and inner development, and not just as a system of divination. They interpreted each card as a key to mystical knowledge and energies associated with the paths of the Kabbalistic tree of life. Their interpretations became the basis for later tarot decks, such as the famous Rider-Waite deck, created by members of the Order. Despite its closed nature, the Order was a haven for the brightest minds of its time: poets, artists, aristocrats, scientists. Members of the Golden Dawn included figures such as the poet William Butler Yeats, the actress Florence Farr, and the writer Arthur Machen. Many of them did not publicly advertise their affiliation, but their works are deeply esoteric. In the 20th century, after the collapse of the original structure, the ideas of the Golden Dawn did not disappear. They were revived in various new organizations: Alpha et Omega, Stella Matutina, Fraternity of the Inner Light, and were even adapted in the context of a new era of spiritual search that began in the 1960s. Many modern esoteric groups, directly or indirectly, trace their origin to the Golden Dawn. Interestingly, the influence of the Order is not only traced in narrow esoteric circles. Many elements of its philosophy have penetrated popular culture, cinema, music, and fashion. The symbolism, the concept of initiations, images of the ritual circle, and elements of the elements, all this is present in films, video games, and even in commercial brands. That is, the Golden Dawn left its mark not only on the magical world, but also on the collective unconscious of our civilization. Today, the Order of the Golden Dawn is remembered not as a museum relic, but as a living spiritual impulse that continues to inspire those who seek a deeper understanding of themselves, the world, and that subtle matter that we are accustomed to calling magic. And although most of the rituals of the Order remain closed, their shadow is present wherever a person begins to search for meaning beyond the usual, striving to cross the line between the visible and the invisible. The Golden Dawn is not just an order, it is a portal to a world where thought has power and a symbol turns into reality. The secretive Brotherhood of Skull and Bones is one of the most mysterious organizations of the American elite, shrouded in legend, rumor, and numerous conspiracy theories. Founded in 1832 on the grounds of Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, this closed organization quickly gained a reputation as a club of influential elites, where connections are formed that can influence politics, finance, intelligence agencies, and global geopolitics. Its symbolism, the skull and crossbones, evokes associations with pirate flags or even rituals associated with death. However, behind this lies something else: a secretive structure in which each member receives a nickname, signs vows of silence, and is included in the cast of those with inside knowledge and influence. The Brotherhood consists of a small number of members. Only 15 Yale students are elected each year, who are called Chosen. They are supposed to be among the leaders of their generation: student union presidents, debate stars, young politicians, athletes, descendants of famous families. After initiation into the fraternity, each of them receives not only a privileged place in the community. He enters a network of contacts that includes the CIA, Billingsgate, the White House, the Carnegie Foundation, corporations, banks, intellectual clubs, and even the elite of military circles. A special place in the mythology of Skull and Bones is occupied by the legendary Tumba, a windowless building in the center of the Yale campus, where the rituals and gatherings of the fraternity take place. It is there that initiations, symbolic ceremonies, readings of manifestos, analysis of the political situation, oaths of silence, and discussions of the future of the world are held. Many former members claim that, in the Tumbi, young initiates are prepared for global influence. They are shown archives, taught the art of strategy, manipulation, secret diplomacy, studying the influence on mass consciousness, geopolitics, and the management of public opinion. In the 20th century, members of the Brotherhood included such famous figures as George Herbert Walker Bush, director of the CIA, Vice President of the United States and President of the United States, his son George Walker Bush, also President, and John Kerry, Senator and Secretary of State. The fact that in the 2004 U.S. presidential elections both candidates were members of the Skull and Bones has caused a wave of suspicion. Is this order not a shadow center of power, where key decisions are made long before they are made public in the democratic process? According to some investigations and books, for example, Secrets of the Tomb by Alexander Robbins, members of the order are closely connected with the formation of U.S. foreign policy, the creation and activities of the CIA, the leadership of the Fed, the IMF, the World Bank. Their influence can be traced in war strategies, diplomatic crises, media processes, even in the creation of laws. All this has given rise to many conspiracy theories, that the Skull and Bones control not only America, but also the world through chains of loyalty, blackmail, and mutual benefit. It is known that many members of the order worked in intelligence, defense structures, global corporations, occupying key positions in the Senate, Congress, defense committees, international forums. The order's secrecy and ritual also give it a cult-like aura. There are reports of symbolic acts, burials in sarcophagi during initiation, readings of personal confessions, and the transfer of ritual objects, including a skull that allegedly belonged to the Apache chief Geronimo. According to one version, this skull was stolen from the grave and is now kept in the tumba as one of the main attributes of the Brotherhood. In the public sphere, the order is often criticized for its opacity, elitism, and violation of democratic principles. Critics believe that such closed structures lead to the creation of a parallel government, an invisible, undemocratic, but real center of power. However, the order's defenders assure that it is just a student fraternity that promotes leadership, honing intellectual skills, and intergenerational support. But the facts related to who exactly was a member of the Brotherhood leave more questions than answers. Despite numerous investigations, documentaries, and books, most of the details about the inner life of the Skull and Bones remain inaccessible to the public. Many former members do not disclose anything about their participation in the Brotherhood until the end of their lives. This only increases suspicion and interest in the organization, which has existed for almost 200 years and does not lose its influence. Some believe that the Skull and Bones is just one branch of a larger system that includes other secret orders: the Bohemian Club, the Trilateral Commission, the Committee of 300, etc. The Skull and Bones is not just an order. It is a symbol of shadow power, the key to understanding the mechanisms of the modern world, where real decisions are made not in the halls of Parliament, but in closed rooms where those who consider themselves chosen to change the course of history gather. And while we will never get a complete list of their goals, meeting places, or rituals, the very existence of such a brotherhood underscores that modern politics, like ancient ones, is often guided by invisible hands from behind the scenes. The Order of the Rosaries, or Rosicrucians, is one of the most mysterious mystical organizations in European history. Their name is associated with the symbol of the rose and the cross, embodying the idea of inner enlightenment, spiritual rebirth, and deep occult knowledge. Although the public existence of the order was first documented in the 17th century through a series of anonymous manifestos, many researchers suggest that its origins go back to the Middle Ages, and perhaps even deeper, to the ancient mysteries, Gnostic brotherhoods, and even to the knowledge preserved after the fall of Atlantis. The first mention of the order appeared in Germany in the form of three famous texts: Fama Fraternitatis, 1614, Confessio Fraternitatis, 1615, and The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz, 1616. They describe the story of the mythical founder of the Brotherhood, Christian Rosenkreuz, a sage who traveled to the East, where he acquired the ancient knowledge of Egypt, the Arab world, Persia, and India, and then returned to Europe to found a secret brotherhood, called to reform the world through a combination of science, spirituality, and philosophy. Christian Rosenkreuz, according to legend, lived for over 100 years, and after his death was buried in a hidden tomb full of symbols and alchemical artifacts. From the very beginning, the Order of the Rosaries positioned itself not as a religious sect, but as a spiritual and philosophical society possessing secret knowledge capable of changing the fate of humanity. They preached the ideas of harmony between science, mysticism, and ethics, called for moral purity, self-knowledge, the fight against ignorance, and the spiritual transformation of the personality. The members of the order, according to the manifestos, lived incognito, did not seek fame, and their actions remained hidden from the public, although the influence, according to the Rosicrucians themselves, was felt in every part of Europe. It is believed that the order had a special system of initiation, in which each degree opened a new level of understanding of the universe. The central place was occupied by alchemy, but not in the crude sense of turning metals into gold, but as a spiritual transmutation, the process of purifying the soul, transforming the internal lead into the gold of divine knowledge. In addition to alchemy, the order was engaged in the study of Hermeticism, Kabbalah, astrology, sacred geometry, Christian mysticism, numerology, archetypes, and ancient knowledge, which, according to them, had been passed down since the times of Atlantis. The symbolism of the order is deeply metaphorical. The rose is a symbol of the soul, which blossoms through suffering and knowledge, and the cross is a symbol of matter, sacrifice, and the earthly path. Together they create the image of a holistic person who combines the earthly and heavenly, body and spirit, matter and divine idea. The Rosicrucians were convinced that true knowledge is impossible without harmony between heart and mind, faith and logic. Despite numerous denials from church and political structures, the order has survived numerous persecutions and transformations. In the 18th century, it experienced a revival due to the influence on Masonic lodges, where many rituals were borrowed from the Rosicrucian tradition. In the 19th century, the ideas of the order were reflected in the work of occultists such as Eliphas Levi, Henry Spencer, Pappus, and later in the structures of the Golden Dawn and the Theosophical Society. Many modern secret societies consider themselves heirs of the Rosaries, and even in the 21st century there are Rosicrucian organizations that continue the tradition of studying occultism, esoteric philosophy, and inner alchemy. Their influence can be seen in art, architecture, literature, and even political utopias. Even René Descartes and Isaac Newton, according to some versions, had contacts or were familiar with the doctrines of the Rosicrucians. In modern culture, the Order of the Rosary has become one of the main symbols of the esoteric tradition of the West. It appears in numerous novels, films, philosophical works, and conspiracy theories. Its influence is not limited to mysticism. Ideas about ethics, individual transformation, and the integration of science and spirituality are becoming increasingly relevant in an era of crisis of values and spiritual vacuum. Despite all attempts to reveal the true essence of the Rosary, its nature remains deeply symbolic and deliberately encrypted. After all, as the Rosicrucians themselves said, true knowledge is not conveyed in words. It is revealed only to those who are ready to receive it, who have overcome the path of self-knowledge and transformation. The Order of the Rosary is not just a brotherhood. This is an archetype of the eternal search, a symbol that the world is not limited to what we see, and that the truth is always hidden behind a veil of symbols, silence, and inner stillness. Freemasons, or Freemasons, are one of the most famous and at the same time most mysterious organizations in the history of mankind. Their official appearance dates back to 1717, when the first Grand Lodge of England was founded in London. However, most researchers agree that the true origins of Freemasonry go much deeper, to the Middle Ages, and perhaps even to the ancient mystery schools of Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Freemasonry was formed at the intersection of builders' guilds, Christian mysticism, Hermeticism, and alchemy. Their symbols, rituals, and philosophy remain the subject of intense analysis, mystery, and conjecture. The main idea of Freemasonry is the construction of a spiritual temple within each person. Symbolic architecture is the central metaphor of their teachings. Man is an imperfect stone that must be hewn, purified, and inscribed in a higher order of being. Therefore, the symbolism of the Mason's tools, compasses, level, hammer, square, carries deep spiritual and moral meanings. Freemasons believe in the great architect of the universe, not as a personal god of a particular religion, but as a higher principle of order, harmony, and creation. Freemason lodges had a strict structure, a clear hierarchy, and a system of initiations, consisting of 3 main degrees: apprentice, journeyman, and master. Each degree was accompanied by rituals, symbolic tests, and knowledge of secrets encoded in myths, architecture, mathematics, alchemy, biblical parables. Over time, in the 18th-19th centuries, numerous higher degrees appeared in various systems: Scottish Rite, York Rite, Memphis Mizraim, and others, which included themes of chivalry, the Jerusalem Temple, Hermetic doctrines, and the Knights Templar. Freemasonry has always attracted representatives of the intellectual and political elite. Members of the lodges were George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Voltaire, Mozart, Goethe, Oscar Wilde, Wilhelm I, Winston Churchill, and dozens of other kings, presidents, artists, philosophers. In many countries, it was the Masonic ideas of freedom, equality, and fraternity that contributed to revolutions, in particular in the USA, France, and Latin America. Freemasons opposed despotism, clericalism, and imposed dogmatism, promoting education, secular humanism, scientific progress, and freedom of conscience. At various times, Freemasonry was persecuted. The Catholic Church saw them as heretics and secret enemies of the faith. In 1738, Pope Clement XII promulgated the bull In Eminenti Apostolatus Specula, which condemned Freemasons and forbade Catholics from joining lodges. Similar bulls were repeated many times, and even in the 20th century, the Vatican maintained a tough stance on Freemasonry. In fascist and totalitarian regimes, lodges were banned, archives were burned, and members were persecuted. However, Masonic lodges operated in the shadows, often retaining their influence on events in politics, architecture, urban planning, and culture. The architecture of Washington, the symbolism on US dollars, the laying of buildings according to Masonic rituals, even the design of large cathedrals in Europe. All this is connected with Masonic philosophy and symbolism. Attention is drawn to mysterious inscriptions, pentagrams, eyes, pillars, geometric figures. All of them carry an esoteric charge. Freemasons are not a religious organization, but they require belief in a higher power, the great architect of the universe. This allows members of different faiths to coexist in one lodge. Their ethics are built on moral improvement, charity, respect for tradition, and self-knowledge. They do not proselytize, do not recruit publicly. Their meetings are closed. Candidates must undergo careful selection and approval by the members of the lodge. Secrecy, symbolism, and influence on key events in world history have become the basis for numerous conspiracy theories. Freemasons have been accused of trying to create a new world order, of manipulating governments, of Satanism, of occult rituals, of hiding ancient knowledge related to Atlantis, aliens, the Temple of Solomon, or the Holy Grail. Many of these accusations have no evidence, but their popularity does not fade away today. Modern Freemasonry exists in various forms: regular, recognized by the Grand Lodge of England; liberal, for example, the Grand Orient of France; mixed, and women's lodges. Some lodges focus on ritual, others on charity or philosophy. Many of them have open websites, museums, and hold public lectures. However, some activities, as before, remain non-public, and some degrees are still shrouded in secrecy. Freemasonry is not just a brotherhood or an organization. It is a symbol of a whole layer of alternative spirituality of the West, where the ideas of humanism, mysticism, archetypes, alchemy, architecture, ethics, and philosophy are combined. It continues to arouse both admiration and fear, and perhaps this is its greatest strength, to remain a mystery that raises questions. Who are they? Creators of a new order or defenders of ancient wisdom? Moral teachers or secret manipulators? The answer, as always in the world of symbols, is hidden behind rituals, silence, and the fire of knowledge. The Illuminati is one of the most mysterious and mythologized brotherhoods in human history. Their name has become synonymous with global conspiracy, hidden power, information control, elite science, and global control of the fate of humanity. Despite the relatively short official period of existence of the Bavarian Illuminati, it is this organization that has given rise to the greatest number of legends, fears, and speculations that do not fade away even after several centuries. Officially, the Order of the Illuminati of Bavaria, Illuminat Norden, was founded on May 1, 1776 in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, by the philosopher and lawyer Adam Weishaupt. Its goal was to create a brotherhood of intelligent, moral, enlightened people who would gradually reform society, rid it of superstition, tyranny, church dogmatism, and promote the common good through knowledge and philosophy. Weishaupt believed that real power should be held by those who are able to think critically, be guided by reason and a moral code, and not blindly follow authorities. The structure of the order was built on the model of secret societies with a multi-level hierarchy. Each new member received a new name. Weishaupt himself was Spartacus, a new role, and had to go through the stages of initiation. This included not only the study of philosophy, logic, history, but also moral self-improvement. All members of the order were obliged to keep a secret, and did not even always know who their leader was. The Illuminati had ambitions to spread their influence throughout Europe, penetrating government, educational, and cultural institutions. They were especially active through Masonic lodges, which by that time already had significant influence in society. The order used lodges to recruit new members, promote its ideas, and create a network of influence. It was through this connection with Freemasonry that the Illuminati became part of broader conspiracy theories that later swept across the West. In 1785, after a series of decrees by the Elector of Bavaria, the Order of the Illuminati was officially banned. The grounds were accusations of anti-clerical and anti-government activities, attempts to undermine the monarchy, and the introduction of republican ideas. Some Illuminati documents were made public. Their letters were confiscated, some members were arrested, but a significant number disappeared. From that moment on, the official history of the Illuminati faded into the shadows, and the history of the myth began. After the ban, the Illuminati became the subject of numerous publications, where they were accused of preparing the French Revolution, controlling finances, organizing revolutions in Latin America, and spreading atheism and relativism. In the 19th and 20th centuries, this legend only strengthened. The Illuminati began to be portrayed as an invisible elite that ruled the world from the shadows, through governments, corporations, the media, science, and culture. Their symbols became the all-seeing eye, the eye of the seer, and the pyramid, signs that later appeared even on US dollars. Conspiracy theories attribute the Illuminati to participation in the creation of the United Nations, the European Union, the World Bank, the IMF, and control over international corporations and intelligence services. Their alleged goal is to introduce the so-called New World Order, a centralized global governance where individual freedoms will be subordinated to artificial intelligence, total surveillance, and elite control. It is the Illuminati that is credited with plans for global chipping, control over pandemics, climate engineering, and even influence on cultural trends. In culture, the image of the Illuminati has become an archetype of a hidden force. They have been written about in novels, from Dan Brown's Angels and Demons to numerous fantasy and detective series. In films, video clips, computer games, hints of the Illuminati are given in the form of symbols, gestures, architecture, mysterious characters. Even show business stars from Beyoncé to Eminem from time to time appear in theories as agents or victims of Illuminati influence. Some researchers believe that the image of the Illuminati itself has become a meme, a modern mythology that explains the complex processes of globalization, loss of identity, technological control, and information warfare. Others are convinced that it is not just a fiction, but part of a real superstructure that operates through networks of elites, philanthropic foundations, think tanks, and world forums. That is why the legend of the Illuminati not only does not disappear, but also takes on new forms. Through digital culture, social networks, and anonymous sources of information. What really happened to the Illuminati? Did they disappear? Did they rethink themselves? Did they take on a different form? There seems to be no answer, but even this fact itself is the strongest fuel for mystery. The Illuminati have become a symbol of the fact that even in the age of total access to information, there are forces that know how to operate in the shadows. Forces that do not require official status, but can change the course of history. And whether they are real or just a projection of our fear of the unknown is up to each person to decide. But as long as there are questions without answers, there will be those who whisper in the shadows. The Illuminati among us. The Order of the Knights Templar, or the Order of the Poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, since its foundation in 1119, has become not only one of the most famous spiritual and military organizations of the Middle Ages, but also the source of many legends, myths, and conspiracy theories that do not fade away in the 21st century. Their influence extended not only to the battlefield, but also to the financial and political mechanisms of all of Europe. Over the 2 centuries of its existence, the order became so powerful that it began to threaten the monarchs themselves. And after its sudden fall, its secrets only grew. The order was created in Jerusalem after the First Crusade. The initiator was the French knight Hugo de Payenne. Initially, the organization consisted of 9 knights who swore allegiance to protect Christian pilgrims on the way to the Holy Land. They lived in a building that was believed to be the remains of the Temple of Solomon, hence the name Templars. The Pope recognized the order as an official Catholic organization in 1129, after which it gained immense popularity among aristocrats who began to donate land, money, and knights in favor of the order. Due to their direct subordination to the Pope, the Templars were independent of secular authorities. They created an autonomous organization with a complex hierarchy that covered most of Europe. The order's centers appeared in France, England, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Hungary, and even in Northern Europe. Their commanderies became not just fortresses or bases, they were economic and administrative centers. The Templars actively participated in the Crusades, showing fanatical courage and a high level of combat training. Unlike other knightly orders, they combined spiritual life with military life. It was strict discipline, monastic vows, but at the same time, bloody participation in the wars for the Holy Land. Their battle flag, a black and white banner with a red cross, became a symbol of sacrifice and loyalty to death. However, the real reason for the growth of the power of the Templars was not only war, but financial ingenuity. The order introduced new banking mechanisms, reminiscent of modern credit systems. A pilgrim going to Jerusalem could deposit funds in the order's Parisian temple and receive a letter according to which he would be given money in the East. Thus, the order became the predecessor of modern banking. It also provided loans to European monarchs, participated in major trade deals, and accumulated incredible wealth, storing them in securely fortified commanderies. At the peak of their influence, the Templars owned over 9,000 properties in Europe, had the best warriors, their own fleet, secret knowledge, and effectively acted as a separate state within states. It was then that rumors began to circulate that they had found the Holy Grail, had seized secret knowledge from the library of the Temple of Solomon, and were even practicing occult rituals. The turning point was the unsuccessful Last Crusade. After the fall of Acre in 1291, the Crusaders lost their last foothold in the Holy Land. The Templars returned to Europe and began to look like a military organization without a function. At the same time, they were extremely rich, independent, and closed. King Philip IV of France, who had debts to the order, decided to liquidate it. On October 13, 1307, Friday, by order of Philip, more than 600 Templars were arrested throughout France. They were accused of heresy, worship of evil spirits, homosexual practices, magic, and betrayal of Christ. Under torture, many of them confessed. The most notorious was the trial of the Grand Master of the Order, Jacques de Molay. He was burned at the stake in 1314, and according to legend, before his death he cursed the king and the pope. Both died within a year. Despite the destruction, the secret of the order did not die. Legends claim that some of the Templars escaped, hid relics, knowledge, and even continued to exist in the shadows. They are associated with the emergence of Freemasonry, with the guardians of the Holy Grail, with the creators of underground libraries and altars, with the protection of the descendants of Jesus Christ. It is the Templars who are often portrayed as carriers of ancient knowledge that does not belong to any church or empire. In culture, the image of the Templars has acquired a cult status. They are frequent heroes of films, games, books, and TV series. From Angels and Demons to Assassin's Creed, from National Treasure to dozens of documentaries, the theme of the Order never loses its relevance. The Order of the Templars is an example of how history is intertwined with myth. Their real-life influence was unprecedented for a religious organization, but what remains is a legend that gave rise to an entire era of mystical theories. And while there are gaps in history, they will be filled by the Templars, as the image of defenders of higher knowledge, cursed knights, and invisible rulers of the past who may never have disappeared. The world of secret organizations is not just a story about rituals, symbols, and conspiracies. It is a deep mirror of the human desire for power, control, truth, and immortality. From orders that preserved alchemical knowledge to brotherhoods that are said to control the destinies of entire states, each of them has left its mark on world history, politics, philosophy, and culture. And although many of them have long been disbanded or officially no longer exist, their influence, legends, and shadows still live on. Thank you for watching. If you want to know more about hidden powers, ancient knowledge, and mystical structures, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. There's even more incredible ahead. And remember, the most dangerous secret is the one that is hidden before your eyes.